The Zithrani Dominion had conquered 17 star systems in less than a century. Their warships moved through the galaxy like shadows of death, leaving nothing but broken worlds behind them. Every species they encountered fell to their knees. Some begged for mercy. Others tried to fight. All of them failed. The Zithrani had never lost a war, and they saw no reason why that would ever change. High Commander Voreth stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Conquest. He was tall, even by Zithrani standards, with gray skin that seemed to absorb light and eyes that glowed a faint purple. He had led campaigns against 12 different species. Each one had crumbled before him. When his long-range sensors detected a small blue planet on the edge of an unremarkable spiral arm, he felt nothing but boredom. Another primitive world, he said to his tactical officer. Sarath, how long until we arrive? 3 standard cycles, High Commander, Sarath replied. Initial scans show a single intelligent species. They call themselves humans. Technology level is quite low. Chemical propulsion. Nuclear fission. Basic radio communications. They have not even colonized their own moon permanently. Warath let out a sound that passed for laughter among his kind. They will surrender within hours. Prepare the standard ultimatum. The Zithrani fleet consisted of 47 warships. Each one was larger than anything humanity had ever built. They moved through the cold darkness of space with the confidence of predators who had never known fear. On Earth, it was a quiet Tuesday night. Lieutenant Daniel Cole was working the night shift at the North American Aerospace Defense Command, facility buried deep inside Cheyenne Mountain. He was 28 years old, with short brown hair and tired eyes. The job was usually boring. He spent most nights watching empty screens and drinking bad coffee. Nothing ever happened. Then something happened. His screen lit up with readings he had never seen before. 47 objects had appeared near Jupiter. They were moving fast, much faster than anything should be able to move. His coffee cup slipped from his fingers and crashed on the floor. Colonel Morris, he called out, his voice shaking. You need to see this. Colonel Katie Morris walked over from her desk. She was a veteran of 20 years in the Air Force, with gray streaks in her dark hair and a face that rarely showed surprise. But when she looked at the screen, her expression changed completely. What am I looking at, Lieutenant? She asked quietly. I do not know, ma'am. But whatever they are heading straight for us. Within an hour, every major government on Earth knew about the approaching fleet. Scientists confirmed what the military already suspected. These were not natural objects. They were ships. And they were definitely not from Earth. The Zithrani broadcast their message on every frequency known to humanity. It appeared on television screens, radio stations, and mobile phones around the world. The voice was cold and mechanical, translated into every major language, people of Earth. You have been chosen for integration into the Zithrani Dominion. You will surrender your planet and your resources. Your leaders will present themselves for processing. Your military forces will stand down. You have 72 hours to comply. Resistance will result in the complete destruction of your species. This is your only warning. The message repeated 3 times and then stopped. Panic spread across the globe. Some people ran into the streets. Others locked themselves in their homes. Churches filled with those seeking comfort. Governments scrambled to respond. President Greg Patterson sat in the Oval Office, surrounded by his advisors and military commanders. He was a former Marine, 63 years old, with a face lined by years of difficult decisions. But he had never faced a decision like this. What are our options? He asked. General Sam Crawford shook his head. Sir, their technology is far beyond ours. Our best weapons might not even scratch their shields. We do not know anything about their capabilities. If we fight, we will probably lose. And if we surrender, we become slaves, Mr. President, or worse. We do not know what integration means to them. Patterson stood up and walked to the window. He looked out at the White House lawn, at the sky beyond it. Somewhere out there, an alien fleet was waiting for humanity to kneel. Get me every world leader on a conference call, he said. We need to talk. The next 12 hours changed human history. Nations that had been enemies for centuries put aside their differences. Old grudges were forgotten. Political disagreements became meaningless. For the first time ever, the entire human race faced a single choice together. President Patterson addressed the world from the Oval Office. Billions of people watched on screens around the planet. His voice was calm but firm. My fellow human beings, we have received a message from beings beyond our world. They have demanded our surrender. They have threatened our destruction. They believe we will simply give up and accept whatever fate they have planned for us. He paused and looked directly into the camera. They are wrong. Humanity has faced impossible odds before. We have fought against tyranny, against oppression, against the forces of nature itself. We have fallen many times, and every time we have gotten back up. That is who we are. That is what we do. We do not surrender. We do not give up. We fight around the world. People stopped what they were doing and listened. I cannot promise victory. I cannot promise that we will survive what is coming. But I can promise you this: we will not go quietly. We will show these invaders what happens when you threaten our home, our families, our future. Earth does not kneel. The speech ended. For a moment, there was silence. Then something remarkable happened. From New York to Tokyo, from London to Sydney, people began to cheer. They poured into the streets, not in panic, but in defiance. Flags were raised. Songs were sung. Strangers hugged each other. Humanity had made its choice. On the bridge of the Eternal Conquest, Sfereth watched the human broadcasts with confusion. He turned to High Commander Vorath. They're refusing our ultimatum, High Commander. They say they will fight. Vorath stared at the screen showing Earth. This tiny blue marble thought it could resist the Dominion. It was absurd. It was laughable. And they have chosen extinction, he said. Prepare the fleet for attack. We will teach these humans the cost of defiance. He had no idea what he was about to awaken. Across Earth, factories began converting to military production. Scientists gathered in emergency meetings. Soldiers said goodbye to their families. Every nation contributed what they could. Old enemies trained side by side. Colonel Morris looked at the data streaming across her screen. The alien fleet would arrive in less than 48 hours. She picked up her phone and made a call to her husband and daughter. I love you both, she said. Whatever happens, remember that. She hung up and turned back to her work. There was a war to prepare for. The clock was ticking. The Zithrani fleet descended toward Earth with the casual confidence of predators approaching helpless prey. High Commander Vorath had studied the reports on human technology and found it almost amusing. These creatures had barely discovered nuclear power. Their fastest ships took months to reach the nearest planets in their own system. Their weapons were primitive chemical explosives and crude projectiles. His tactical officer, Stirith, had calculated that the conquest would take less than one standard cycle. Perhaps two, if the humans were particularly stubborn. The Dominion had destroyed far more advanced civilizations with minimal effort. Admiral Chris Bennett coordinated Earth's defense from a command bunker buried 300 meters beneath the Rocky Mountains. He was 56 years old, a career Navy man who had spent his life preparing for wars that never came. Now the biggest war in human history was about to begin, and he knew the odds were against them. Status report, he said to his staff. Lieutenant Commander Amy Walsh pulled up the tactical display. All global forces are in position, Admiral. Every submarine, carrier, and destroyer we have is deployed. Air forces from 37 nations are ready to launch. Ground defenses are active on every continent. What about the special packages? Walsh nodded. Captain Ellis and his squadron are airborne. They are carrying everything we could give them. Bennett looked at the map showing the approaching alien fleet. 47 ships, each one large enough to block out the sun. His forces were like ants preparing to fight elephants. Oh. Then we do what we can, he said quietly, and we make them pay for every inch. The Zithrani began their assault at dawn over the Pacific Ocean. Their plasma cannons were designed to break. Through energy shields and reinforced armor, against human buildings, they were devastating beyond imagination. Tokyo was hit first. Beams of superheated plasma cut through skyscrapers like knives through paper. The city burned. Millions of people ran through streets filled with smoke and fire, screaming, crying, trying to escape the destruction falling from the sky. Then Moscow. Then London. Then New York. Then Beijing. In the first hour, the death toll reached 50 million. The Zithrani moved without mercy, without hesitation. They had done this many times before. This was simply how conquest worked. But humanity was not like the other species the Dominion had faced. Captain Ryan Ellis flew at the head of a squadron of 12 modified stealth bombers. He was 34 years old, with a wife and 2 children back home in Kansas. He thought about them as he approached the alien fleet. He thought about what would happen to them if he failed. "All aircraft, this is Eagle Leader," he said into his radio. "We have one shot at this. Make it count." Each bomber carried a single weapon in its payload bay, the most powerful nuclear warheads humanity had ever built. Scientists had worked around the clock to maximize their yield. Engineers had designed new delivery systems in less than 48 hours. It was a desperate gamble based on a simple theory. The Zithrani shields were designed to stop energy-based attacks. Plasma weapons, laser cannons, particle beams. But nuclear weapons were different. They combined raw, explosive force with radiation, electromagnetic pulses, and thermal energy. No species in the galaxy used such crude weapons anymore. That was about to be a very big mistake. Ellis locked on to the nearest Zithrani destroyer. It was 3 kilometers long, bristling with weapons that could vaporize his aircraft in a heartbeat. He did not hesitate. Fox won away. The missile launched from his bomber and streaked toward the alien ship. The Zithrani point defense systems tried to intercept it, but the missile was small and fast. It slipped through their fire and struck the destroyer's shield. The nuclear warhead detonated. For a brief moment, a new sun appeared in Earth's atmosphere. The flash was visible from 3 continents. The electromagnetic pulse knocked out power grids across half of Asia and the Zithrani. Shields failed. The destroyer shuddered as the full force of the nuclear explosion hit its hull. Cracks appeared in its armor. Then the ship broke apart, its pieces tumbling toward the ocean below. 3,000 Zithrani soldiers died in an instant, on the bridge of the Eternal Conquest. High Commander Vorath stared in disbelief. One of his warships was gone, destroyed by a primitive weapon that no civilized species had used in millennia. Before he could react, 2 more explosions lit up the sky. 2 more destroyers vanished in clouds of atomic fire. "What is happening?" he demanded. Sirith was frantically checking his instruments. "Their weapons are some kind of fission-based explosive. Our shields are not calibrated for this type of attack. The energy signature is completely different from standard weapons. Adjust the shields." "I am trying, High Commander, but the calculations will take time." Ellis and his squadron pressed their attack. More missiles flew. More ships died. The sky filled with fire and falling debris. Human pilots flew through clouds of radiation, knowing that the exposure would probably kill them eventually. They did not care. They had families to protect. On the ground, people watched the battle through telescopes and camera feeds. They saw the impossible happening. The alien ships were falling. Admiral Bennett received the reports in his bunker. His hands were shaking. 7 confirmed kills, Walsh reported. 3 more ships, heavily damaged. But Captain Ellis reports that the aliens are starting to adapt. Their shields are changing. Tell them to pull back. "We have made our point." Ellis heard the order, but he had 1 more missile. 1 more target. The Eternal Conquest itself hung in the sky ahead of him, its hull glowing with strange symbols. The command ship. He armed his last weapon. "Eagle Leader, you are ordered to retreat." The radio crackled. "Return to base immediately." Ellis thought about his wife, his children, his home. Then he thought about what would happen if the aliens won. Negative command. "I have a clear shot." He launched the missile. The Eternal Conquest's shields had already been adjusted. The nuclear warhead detonated against an invisible barrier that absorbed most of the explosion, but not all of it. The flagship shuddered. Alarms screamed throughout its corridors. A section of the hull cracked and vented atmosphere into space. High Commander Voroth was thrown from his chair. When he stood up, his face was bleeding from a deep cut. He looked at the damage reports with something he had not felt in decades. Fear. All ships fall back, he ordered. Retreat to the asteroid belt. Now. The Zithrani fleet turned and fled. They left behind the wreckage of 11 destroyed ships and countless dead soldiers. The greatest military force in the galaxy was running from a species that had never even left its home. Planet Ellis watched them go. His bomber was damaged, leaking fuel, barely flyable. He turned toward home, Eagle Leader to command. Targets are retreating. We did it. Admiral Bennett slumped in his chair. Around him, his staff was cheering. Some were crying. They had won the first battle, but Bennett knew this was only the beginning. The aliens would be back. They would adapt. They would bring more ships. He looked at the casualty reports from the cities that had been attacked. 63 million dead. Entire urban centers reduced to ashdot. This was war now. Real war. The kind that would test everything humanity had. He stood up and faced his team. Get me every scientist on the planet. We need to reverse engineer whatever technology we can find from those crashed ships and prepare our next defense. The clock was still ticking. The Zithrani fleet regrouped beyond the asteroid belt, licking their wounds and trying to understand what had happened. High Commander Voroth sat in his damaged command center, staring at the reports that made no sense. They had lost 11 warships to a species that still used chemical rockets. It was impossible. It was humiliating. The main fleet has been contacted, Cirith reported. They will arrive in 6 of the local planet's months. Over 10,000 ships, High Commander. Voroth nodded slowly. Good. When they arrive, we will burn this planet to ash. No survivors. No mercy. What do we do until then? We watch. We learn. And we prepare for their primitive tricks. He touched the wound on his face. It would leave a scar. A reminder of the day he had underestimated a species. On Earth, the celebrations were brief. People knew that the aliens would return. The question was when, with how much force. Dr. Megan Torres led the team of scientists tasked with studying the crashed Zithrani ships. She was 41 years old, a physicist from Stanford who had spent her career studying theoretical propulsion systems. Now, she was looking at technology that made her theories look like children's drawings. "This is incredible," she whispered as she examined a piece of alien hull plating. The metal was lighter than aluminum, but stronger than titanium. When she ran an electric current through it, it became almost completely rigid. They have materials that should not exist according to our physics. Our colleague, Dr. Kevin Park, was studying the remains of an alien engine. His eyes were red from lack of sleep. Their propulsion system bends space itself. They are not traveling through space. They are folding it. We have theorized about this for decades, but they actually built it. Can we copy it? Park shook his head. Not exactly. But we might be able to build something similar. Something cruder, but functional. He paused. If we have enough time, time was the one thing they did not have. In the Nevada desert, Sergeant Nathan Price led a special forces team on a mission that would change everything. 3 days after the battle, a damaged Zithrani fighter had crashed in the mountains. The pilot had survived. The squad moved through the rocky terrain in complete silence. Price was a veteran of 3 combat tours, a man who had seen terrible things and kept going. But this was different. This was not fighting other humans. This was hunting an alien. They found the creature hiding in a cave, wounded and weak. It was tall and gray-skinned, with purple eyes that seemed to glow in the darkness. When it saw the soldiers, it raised a weapon, but Price was faster. His bullet struck the alien's shoulder, and it collapsed. "Take it alive," Price ordered. "Command wants to ask it some questions." The Zithrani soldier was transported to a secure facility outside Washington. It took weeks to establish basic communication, but eventually the interrogators learned to understand its language. And what they learned was terrifying. The Dominion controls over 200 star systems, the alien explained through a translation device. Your small victory means nothing. A fleet of 10,000 ships is coming. You cannot fight them. You cannot run. Your only choice is death or submission. Why are you telling us this? The interrogator asked. The alien made a sound that might have been laughter. Because it does not matter. Nothing you do will change the outcome. Private Ashley Dunn was a 23-year-old communications specialist who had joined the Army straight out of high school. She spent her days monitoring alien transmissions, trying to decode their signals. Most of it was military chatter that made no sense. Then she found something important. Sir, I have intercepted a message to their home world, she reported to her commanding officer. I cannot translate all of it, but I can read the numbers. They are requesting reinforcements. The main fleet will arrive in approximately 180 days. 6 months. Humanity had 6 months to prepare for an invasion force that outnumbered them 1,000 to 1. Admiral Bennett called a meeting of every major world leader. The message was grim but clear. We have half a year to build a defense against an enemy we barely understand. Every factory, every resource, every scientist on this planet needs to focus on one goal: survival. Nothing else matters. The world listened. And the world responded. Factories that had built cars started building weapons. Steel mills ran 24 hours a day. Universities became research centers where students worked alongside professors on problems that had seemed impossible just months. A GO, Dr. Torres, made a breakthrough in the 3rd month. She had figured out how to adapt the alien engine technology into something humans could build. It was not as elegant as the Zithrani version. It was bulky, unreliable, and consumed enormous amounts of power. But it worked. We can build ships that travel faster than light, she announced to the assembled military commanders. Not many, and not fast enough to escape, but fast enough to fight. Commander Ethan Blake was chosen to pilot the first human vessel equipped with the new technology. He was a former test pilot, a man who had spent his career pushing experimental aircraft to their limits. Now he was going to push something far beyond anything he had ever imagined. The ship was called the Reliance. It was ugly by any standard, a collection of human engineering and stolen alien technology welded together with desperate hope. But when Blake activated the engine and felt the ship leap forward, he understood something that changed him forever. Humanity was no longer bound to Earth. Meanwhile, ground forces trained for something no soldier had ever prepared for. How do you fight an enemy from another world? Sergeant Price led the training programs, using everything they had learned from the captured alien. They are stronger than us, he told his soldiers. They are faster than us. Their weapons are better than ours. But they have weaknesses. They underestimate us. They think we are primitives. We are going to use that against them. By the 5th month, Earth had a fleet. 300 ships, each one armed with nuclear weapons and newly developed plasma cannons based on captured Zithrani technology. It was a tiny force compared to what was coming. But it was something. Colonel Morris coordinated the defense grid from her command center. Every satellite, every ground station, every weapon on the planet was linked into a single network. When the enemy came, they would face a coordinated response. We might actually have a chance, she said to Admiral Bennett during a late-night briefing. A small one, but a chance. Bennett looked at the star charts showing the approaching fleet. 10,000 ships. Millions of enemy soldiers. Weapons that could crack planets. Then we take that chance, he said, because it is the only one we have got. On the last night before the enemy arrived, people around the world looked up at the stars. They knew what was coming. They knew the odds. But they also knew something else. They were not going to give up. Not now. Not ever. Humanity was ready to fight. The Zithrani. Main fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the solar system. 10,000 warships, each one carrying enough firepower to destroy a small moon. Admiral Krath, commander of the Armada, looked at the distant blue planet with contempt. The primitives, who embarrassed Vorath, he said to his staff. They will learn the true meaning of fear. Krath had crushed rebellions on a dozen worlds. He had exterminated entire species without losing sleep. This mission was personal. The Dominion could not allow a primitive species to believe they could resist. The punishment would be absolute. High Commander Voroth stood beside him, his face still scarred from the previous battle. Do not underestimate them, Admiral. They are creative, desperate, dangerous. Krath made a dismissive sound. You lost 11 ships to savages with crude explosives. I have 10,000. There will be no mistakes this time. The fleet advanced toward Earth. Commander Ethan Blake stood on the bridge of the Reliance, watching the sensor readings with calm focus. Around him, the human fleet waited in formation. 300 ships, crewed by men and women who knew they might not survive the day. But none of them considered running. Admiral Bennett is on the command frequency, his communications officer reported. Blake nodded. Put him through. Bennett's voice filled the bridge. All ships, this is command. The enemy fleet is entering the solar system. And this is it. Everything we have worked for comes down to today. Fight hard. Fight smart. And remember what you are fighting for. The channel closed. Blake looked at his crew. You heard the man? Let us show these aliens what humanity is made of. The battle began at 0600 hours, Greenwich Mean Time. The human fleet met the Zithirani Armada near the orbit of Mars. It was a desperate gamble. Outnumbered more than 30 to 1, humanity could not win a straight fight. They needed to be clever. They needed to be brutal. Blake led the first attack wave. 20 ships armed with nuclear missiles and plasma cannons dove straight into the heart of the enemy formation. The Zithirani opened fire with weapons that turned space itself into fire. The human ship Defiant was the first to fall. Then the Valor. Then the Liberty. But the survivors kept coming. Launch all missiles, Blake ordered. Everything we have. Hundreds of nuclear warheads streaked toward the alien fleet. The Zithirani shields had been improved since the first battle, but they could not stop everything. Ships exploded. Debris scattered across the void. On Earth, people watched the battle through telescope feeds and satellite images. They saw the flashes of light as ships died. They prayed. Admiral Krath watched his tactical display with growing frustration. They were losing ships. Not many compared to the total fleet, but far more than expected. These humans were not fighting like a primitive species. They were fighting like cornered animals. Increase firepower, he ordered. Destroy them all. The second phase of the battle was even more brutal. Human ships that had exhausted their missiles resorted to ramming attacks. Captain Lisa Monroe piloted her damaged cruiser straight into a Zithirani carrier, killing herself and 3,000 enemy soldiers. Her last words were broadcast across the fleet. Tell my kids I love them. On the ground, the defense grid activated. Dr. Torres had designed a network of railguns hidden across every continent. They fired tungsten rods the size of telephone poles at hypersonic speeds. The kinetic energy alone was enough to punch through alien armor. Orbital platforms launched wave after wave of autonomous drones. Each one carried a small nuclear device. Most were destroyed before they reached their targets. But enough got through to matter. Sergeant Price led a boarding party onto a damaged Zithirani battleship. His team of 30 soldiers fought their way through corridors filled with alien warriors twice their size. They used grenades, rifles, and when those ran out, knives and fists. Keep moving, Price shouted as plasma fire burned the air around them. The reactor is 2 levels down. They lost half their team reaching the reactor core. Price himself was shot twice, his armor barely keeping him alive. But they planted the charges and ran. The battleship exploded behind them as their shuttle pulled away. Price watched the fireball through the viewport, his body screaming with pain. 1 down, he muttered. 9,999 to go. The battle raged for 18 hours. Human losses were catastrophic. Of the 300 ships that had started the fight, fewer than 50 remained. Millions of soldiers had died in space, on orbital stations, and on the ground defending key installations. But the Zithirani were bleeding too. Admiral Krath stared at his casualty reports in disbelief. They had lost over 2,000 ships. 2,000 warships destroyed by a species that had never traveled beyond their own moon before this year. It was unprecedented. It was unacceptable. Admiral, his tactical officer reported, the humans are launching a final attack wave. 20 ships heading directly for our command cluster. Blake led the charge. His ship was badly damaged. Half his crew was dead, and his ammunition was nearly gone. But he had one last trick. All ships, this is Reliance. We are going to punch a hole through their formation. Everyone behind me. No hesitation. No retreat. The 20 remaining human ships formed a wedge and accelerated toward the heart of the Zithrani fleet. It was a suicide run. Everyone knew it, but the Zithrani did not. At the last moment, the human ships released their final payload. Not missiles. Not bombs. Containers filled with debris, radioactive waste, and every piece of scrap metal they could find. The Zithrani shields were designed to stop energy weapons. They could not stop 1,000,000 pieces of shrapnel traveling at relativistic speeds. Ships were shredded. Sensors were blinded. The carefully organized Zithrani formation fell into chaos. And in that chaos, the human survivors struck. Blake guided his ship through the gap they had created, straight toward the enemy flagship. His weapons were exhausted. His engines were failing. But his hull was intact. Ramming speed, he said calmly. The Reliance struck the Zithrani command ship at full acceleration. The impact was visible from Earth. Admiral Krath died instantly. His tactical staff died with him. The chain of command shattered in a single moment of human defiance. When the survivors of the battle regrouped, fewer than 2,000 Zithrani ships remained. They retreated toward the edge of the solar system, broadcasting warnings to any Dominion vessel that might follow. Do not come here. Do not attack this world. They are insane. They are dangerous. Stay back. Blake survived. His ship was destroyed, but the escape pod was recovered by a search team 3 days later. He woke up in a hospital on Earth, surrounded by doctors and generals who called him a hero. He did not feel like a hero. He felt like a man who had watched too many friends die. But they had won. Against impossible odds, humanity had won. The galaxy would never forget what happened that day. The Galactic Council had not convened in full session for over 3 centuries. There had been no need. The major powers had divided the galaxy AMO, NG'd themselves long ago, and the occasional border dispute was settled through quiet negotiation. But the news from the edge of the spiral arm had shaken every species to their core. The Zithrani Dominion had been defeated. Representatives from 47 species gathered in the ancient assembly hall on the neutral world of Kirith. Prime, they came from civilizations that had mastered faster than light travel millennia ago. From empires that controlled hundreds of star systems. From cultures so old they had forgotten their own origins. And all of them wanted to understand what had happened. The Zithrani ambassador, tall creature named Tyvith, presented the official report. His voice was heavy with shame. We sent a scouting force of 47 warships to assess the planet called Earth. They were repelled with significant losses. We then deployed the main fleet. 10,000 of our finest warships. 8,000 of those ships are now debris floating in the void. The remaining vessels fled and have established a perimeter far from human space. A murmur ran through the assembly. 8,000 ships. It was an unimaginable loss. The Valtharan delegate, an ancient being who had seen empires rise and fall, asked the obvious question. How is this possible? The humans have only recently developed nuclear technology. They have no interstellar capability. How could they destroy the Dominion's fleet? Tyvith's expression was difficult to read, but his answer was clear. They fight differently than any species we have encountered. They do not surrender. They do not retreat. They sacrifice themselves without hesitation to achieve their goals. When their weapons failed, they used their own ships as weapons. When their ships were destroyed, they continued fighting with small arms and explosives. They are irrational by any standard we understand. They sound insane, another delegate commented. Perhaps Tyvith replied, but they won. The council debated for 3 days. Some argued that humanity should be exterminated before they became a greater threat. Others suggested containment, surrounding their system with blockades. A few proposed making contact and offering peace. Then the human ambassador arrived. Nicole Adams walked into the assembly hall with calm confidence. She was 52 years old, former diplomat who had spent decades negotiating difficult treaties and impossible agreements. But nothing in her career had prepared her for this moment. She was the first human to stand for the collected civilizations of the galaxy. The silence was absolute as she approached the speaking platform. She could feel thousands of alien eyes watching her, some with curiosity, some with fear, some with hatred. She did not care about any of that. My name is Nicole Adams, and I speak for the people of Earth. I understand that you have been discussing what to do about us, whether to destroy us, contain us, or ignore us. I am here to tell you our position. She paused and looked around the chamber. Humanity does not seek war. We did not ask to be attacked. We were minding our own business, living on our small blue planet, when the Zithrani Dominion decided we would make easy prey. They were wrong. Thousands of our people died, proving them wrong. But we did not start that fight. They did. Tavith shifted uncomfortably in his seat. We do not want to conquer the galaxy. We do not want to rule over other species. We have enough problems of our own to solve without looking for new ones. What we want is simple, to live in peace, to explore the stars at our own pace, and to be left alone by anyone who might consider repeating the Dominion's mistake. She stepped forward, her voice growing harder. But I want to make something very clear to every species in this room. If you attack Earth, if you threaten our people, if you try to take what is ours, you will face the same response the Zithrani received. We will fight you with everything we have. We will not surrender. We will not negotiate from weakness. We will make you pay for every drop of human blood you spill. The chamber was utterly silent. The Dominion sent 10,000 ships. They lost 8,000. That should tell you everything you need to know about what happens when you underestimate humanity. Consider this your only warning. Stay back from Earth. She turned and walked out of the chamber without waiting for a response. The council voted the next day. The decision was unanimous. A protected zone was established around the human home system. Warning beacons were placed at every approach vector, broadcasting a simple message in every known language. Attention. You are approaching human territory. This species is not to be contacted, threatened, or attacked without extreme caution. They have proven capable of inflicting catastrophic losses on superior forces. One warning. One caution. Stay back from Earth. On Earth, life slowly returned to something resembling normal. The cities that had been destroyed were being rebuilt. Memorials were constructed for the millions who had died. The soldiers who had fought were honored as heroes. Commander Blake returned to active duty after 3 months of recovery. His body was covered in scars, but his spirit was unbroken. The Reliance had been destroyed, but a new ship was being built in his name. He would fly again. Dr. Torres continued her research. The alien technology they had captured opened doors that humanity had never imagined. Faster-than-light travel, energy shields, materials that defied physics as they had understood it. She knew it would take decades to fully understand everything, but she had time. Colonel Morris retired from active service. She had done her part. Now she wanted to spend time with her family. To watch her grandchildren grow up in a world that was still free because of what her generation had sacrificed. Sergeant Rice received the highest military honors 3 nations could offer. He accepted them quietly, thinking about the soldiers who had died under his command. He would carry their memory for the rest of his life. Private. Dunn was promoted and given a leadership position in the newly formed Galactic Communications Division. Her job was to monitor alien transmissions and ensure humanity was never surprised again. President Patterson addressed the world one final time before leaving office. We have survived the greatest test in human history. We have proven that when we stand together, when we fight for what matters, there is nothing we cannot overcome. The galaxy knows our name now. They know what we are capable of. And they know that Earth is not a world to be taken lightly. He smiled, looking older and more tired than he had before the invasion. We have new challenges ahead. New opportunities. New dangers. But we face them as we have always faced our challenges. Together. United. Human. Across the planet, people gathered to watch the sunset on the one-year anniversary of the invasion. They remembered the dead. They celebrated the living. They looked up at the stars with new eyes. The universe was vast and full of wonders and terrors beyond imagination. But humanity was no longer afraid. They had earned their place among the stars and anyone foolish enough to threaten. Earth would learn the same lesson the Zitharani had learned. Some species are not meant to be conquered. Some worlds are not. Meant to kneel, some planets fight back. Earth was one of them, and the galaxy would never forget.